All right, welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast, Mailbag edition. Erik Skopil's on the show. I'm Matt Prehm. Mailbag. It's Monday, December 1st. Oregon's got a game. We just don't know who it's against from a football perspective. It's going to be in the college football playoffs. It would be an utter shock if it's not at Autzen Stadium. So you could probably count on either a Friday night game or probably a Saturday night game, one of those two options. I think it's like the 20th and the 19th and the 20th are the dates that Oregon could be playing. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a Friday night game. It feels kind of perfect for a West Coast spot, standalone game, or maybe a Saturday night game as the last game of the day. But Erik, Mailbag is heavily focused on football, as it should be, but we're also going to start diving into now basketball, as both men and women have started their seasons. One's off to a great start, which has caught the attention of the fan base, and the other has kind of tanked a little bit, which has also caught the attention of the fan base.
Yeah, we'll do basketball after the break. This is a full first break football all the time. Second half, we'll dive into some hoops, like Matt said, some positive, some not so positive, kind of give some thoughts there. It's early. We want to just kind of give a hint that, hey, we've got some time now before Oregon plays on the gridiron again. These hardwood teams maybe are worth paying a little bit of attention to over the next couple of weeks while the football team is not playing. Start with this one, though, from @DrewGoalie. Who would be an ideal first-round matchup for Oregon, and who would be one team they would want to avoid early on? #Autzen Audibles. By the way, we're going to have a lot better idea of kind of what's possible for Oregon after Tuesday. I will be curious to see if Oregon is at 4 or 5, which is where they are. They're 4 in the consensus in both polls. It does open the door up slightly for a bye. I don't know if the fans want to hear that, but like hypothetically, let's say if on Tuesday the committee has Oregon at 4, like the AP and the coaches do, and that would be ahead of Texas Tech, ahead of Ole Miss, ahead of Texas A&M. Those are the other one-loss teams. Georgia's comfortably ahead of Oregon. I think we all agree. What happens in the Big 12 championship game if Texas Tech goes down to BYU? I don't think BYU's vaulting all the way up from 10 or 11 to pass Oregon, and that would maybe open the door for Oregon to be a third Big 10 team with a bye. It kind of feels wild. There's also the possibility of what happens if Alabama beats Georgia.
I was just going to say that could also very happen, and I don't think Alabama will jump Oregon. I mean,
2 losses.
That's like a 5 or 6 ranking jump.
Yep.
A bye is very much sneaky in play for Oregon.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying it's even necessarily what you want, because again, according to the fan base, they very much would prefer to avoid a bye after what happened last week. But even if you look at and we're going to do this once again, this whole all-state predictor that ESPN has put together, they still think that there's about a 42% chance Oregon is a bye team, according to
42% chance.
The predictor. So I don't know. We'll see. I kind of lean it won't happen. I prefer to watch Oregon play a game in Autzen Stadium that first week, in part because it would be a nice warm-up game, potentially getting some guys back. And to now jump into Drew Goley's question here of who would be an ideal first-round matchup. If Oregon's the 5 or the 6, and that's where they're locked in, I would be shocked if they fall further beneath that, because again, you're looking at a situation where Oregon is a static resume. Most of these other resumes are static, aside from the handful of teams playing in conference championship games. And those behind are way behind, and those ahead are comfortably ahead. So I look at this and think, if they're 5 or 6, wouldn't it be the preference to be playing a non-at-large team who sneaks in, right? I think that's the case, is you'd love to be playing either the group of 5 team. You'd like Virginia to win, so maybe that's a possibility, hosting Virginia. If Duke upsets Virginia in the ACC championship, they're not getting in as an 8-5 team. The ACC gets left out. The group of 5 is the top 4, conference champion in, and that's where maybe a Miami, maybe a Texas, somebody like that sneaks in, a more talented team. that would be the worst case if we're talking first round. He's saying early on. I just want to avoid Ohio State. Period. Point blank.
Yeah, I don't want to play Ohio State. I also don't want to play Georgia the first
Those are the two
week
teams.
or the second week of the college football playoffs. I think the 4 seed is very much in play, and it's not the overwhelmingly favorite outcome to happen, but I think Duck fans need to be realistic and be prepared that if things shake out in a manner that is very reasonable, Georgia losing to Alabama and Texas Tech losing to BYU, both outcomes help. If both happen, it almost certainly becomes a reality.
Sorry, Matt, one thing. I just looked this up and I realized I clicked Oregon doesn't win the Big Ten championship game. If it doesn't make the game, the number for a bye actually jumps to 52%, by the way. Just wanted to say that. So even better.
Yeah, like it's a real thing here. And I think they're probably going to be the 5, maybe the 6. I'll be really curious to see how the committee ranks Texas A&M, having lost that on the road at Texas. Texas has 3 losses, but they've got a bunch of good wins. It was a loss on the road opposed to losing at home. How much do they value that? Texas A&M's schedule outside of Texas hasn't been really the toughest in SEC play, but they also have a win over Notre Dame, which is a pretty big marquee win. That's going to dictate things. Ole Miss, with Lane Kiffin now leaving, the committee has said, and we've seen precedent now with players, but precedent has been if a key piece of your program's unavailable, that dings you. And I think the head coach of your team is a pretty key piece. How much do they get dinged is going to be a question. But I'm with you. I want the group of 5. I want Virginia. You want that game to be played at home. But maybe this is a hot take, Erik. I would rather have the bye. I would rather knowing where this team is at from a health standpoint, just a whole nother week without physical contact of a game, risk of injury, risk of aggravation of an injury. I would rather have the bye week. And I know that's probably not the popular opinion. It takes away what would be maybe the biggest game ever at Autzen Stadium, no matter who the opponent is, because it's a playoff game in mid-December. It's the latest game ever played at Autzen. It would take that away. No doubt about it. I want to see that game. I want to be at that game. But I think for the betterment of the program, you probably want the bye week.
Well, now we're dealing with the same scenario we dealt with last year, where it's a case of it's rest versus rust. And Oregon, if they do get the bye, which would be unusual, that means no conference championship game, obviously. That would be a 31 to 32 day break between action from Washington to either playing on December 31st or playing on New Year's Day. That's a long time. So the question becomes, and this was the argument last year when Oregon came out kind of rusty, didn't play very well against Ohio State. Ohio State looked like the better team. It's kind of that case of, do you think this team needs a kind of gimme game? Because that's ultimately it's because if you do get the bye, what you lose out on is not just the home game, but that game to kind of keep you in the competition, right? And even though you'd be playing most likely a Virginia or like a Tulane, North Texas, one of those type of schools, those would be games you'd be favored by 2 or 3 scores at minimum, maybe even more. I think I saw minus 22 against one of those last night when I was perusing for some of these projections. But if you're the 4, then you're getting the 5 most likely, which is a big step up. And that's a game that maybe you're favored by 5 to 10 points. Maybe you're favored by, depending on who it is, maybe it's 3 to 5 points, right? Like maybe it's even a push depending upon who it is. I don't know if there's anybody out there that would be quite there unless Georgia falls out somehow. So I don't know. I'm kind of of both minds there. I don't know. And maybe it's just because of what happened last year. And that's why the fan base is where it's at. They had a long break last year, came out, played its worst game of the season, got absolutely embarrassed. They don't want to see that happen again. I totally get that. I also say, like, if you get could the full duration there open the door to getting Evan Stewart in the lineup possibly? Do you need Evan Stewart if he is? Do you need him to have a game before you're playing the bigger, better teams? These are all reasonable questions, but Oregon is in a unique spot because I remember when we were talking about this a week ago, people said, hey, Oregon gets the bye. You also have to realize they're playing in the Big Ten championship game. So they are actually playing the same number of games. Oregon is in a unique spot where they could avoid playing a Big Ten championship game and have, a shorter distance, I guess, to the finish line in the CFP. So it's a unique situation if it goes that way. I don't anticipate necessarily it will, but the odds are, I think, better than it seems like people want to give it credit for. Anything else in this one?
I think we're good.
Okay. Let's jump over to this one. And if there are two topics right now the fan base are talking about, it's what do we want in the playoffs? And then who's going to be even on this Oregon coaching staff for the playoffs, for after the playoffs? And this one, I think, from @OnlyBoomX sums up kind of a couple different questions, a nice little group of topics we can get into. Would Tosh or Stein still coach Oregon in the playoffs if they're hired by other programs? Also, who do you see as candidates for OC if Stein is hired elsewhere? And then he also writes, the DC role seems more cut and dry with Chris Hampton as the obvious choice. Hashtag Autzen Audibles. Thank you, OnlyBoomX. That's the first time I think we've read a question from him. I think, and this isn't reporting, Dan set a precedent when he was at Georgia with what he did. And I think because he did that, remember, he was juggling 2 jobs. I remember doing a signing day Zoom with him, and he had just finished a full work day at Georgia getting ready for their playoff games. And he was exhausted. Was like, I've been barely sleeping. I'm trying to build this roster at Oregon and also build this game plan at Georgia. I think knowing the kind of workers on this staff and knowing the kind of program Dan has built, I would anticipate both those guys would want to coach in the playoffs. It's not reporting. That's just my expectation. Does that seem right to you?
I expect both these guys to be on staff for the playoff run.
I guess, and the natural follow-up is, do we expect those guys to both be on staff in 2026? Because there are 2 schools that are very near to, well, an alma mater and then a school that was in state for the other that Coach Stein has ties to that have now both opened. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know we've been talking about it, and we kind of alluded on the post game in Seattle that it felt like that was Tosh's last regular season game at Oregon. He'd take the Cal job. This situation with Stoops in Kentucky kind of that didn't come out of nowhere, but it materialized more clearly on Sunday when they made that decision. Where's your head at with that? Do you expect Oregon's going to have to be looking to replace both coordinators here over the next month or so?
I would like. I hate doing like the percentages thing.
I know you do.
But I'm gonna do it here.
Okay.
It's one of those like 35 to 48% chance likelihood of both guys being gone.
Okay.
Like, it's not the overwhelming favorite. It's not the majority number. But it's real enough that if the right things happen, both guys are gone. And I think it's very likely that one of them is gone. And
I mean, I still think Tosh is gone, and that's going to be announced later. I still think that.
Yeah, like I think that's probably the one that makes a lot of sense. It probably comes back to if he doesn't leave for Cal, he doesn't get the assurances that he wants of an increased salary pool, increased resource pool for NIL, that type of stuff. That's maybe why he wouldn't leave, but I would be kind of surprised if he doesn't take that job if offered. And I would be kind of surprised if they don't offer him the job. But that has to happen, but we'll see. Excuse me. Stein has an interesting choice to make because Kentucky has opened up. It's considered by some the best job in college football because it's a fan base that if you go 9-3, you are celebrated as if you went 8-1 because, or 11-1, excuse me, because it's a basketball school and it's the basketball school in the country, probably. And Stein is from there. He grew up a Kentucky fan. Obviously, he went and played at Louisville, coached at Louisville, but he wasn't given an opportunity to play at Kentucky. But he grew up a Kentucky fan. I think his dad or his grandpa played there.
His dad played there, yeah.
So he comes from a family that's a Kentucky Wildcat family. Question becomes, is that the best job you can get? Or if you come back, and like we all kind of assume Dante Moore is going to come back,
Bingo.
the following year, your opportunities are going to be tenfold of what you could have. Like, is Kentucky a good job? Yeah, it is. But could Stein do a hell of a lot better? Absolutely. If he waits one more year, and some of these other jobs are going to open up, and he could have a school that's got a better position to win now or win quickly and sustain its success than a place like Kentucky.
To your point about the expectations being different there, it's an SEC job where Stoops was there 13 years, had 5 winning seasons, but he had 2 10-win seasons, and that just gave him the longevity. So you're right. There is a very different expectation there from other SEC jobs. It's a lot safer than going to, say, Auburn, right, which is a school right now that also hasn't had a ton of recent success being the last 5 or 6 years. But if you're at Auburn and you go 5-7, 7-6, 8-4, you're gone. Like that's the way the cookie crumbles there.
Good enough.
Kentucky, you get a couple of these high end seasons here, and it was interesting looking at Stoops here. Then they're spread out, and it was 2018 and 2021. He won 10 games. There's a bunch of 5-win, 7-win, couple 8-win seasons in there. Some 2-win seasons. Obviously, this year was another 5-win, and that was kind of why it was let's show him the door. He was 25-68 in SEC play over 13 years. That's an average of less than 2 wins per year. They also had, I think, some sort of NCAA situation happen there where they lost some wins over the course of one season. But still, it's a job where the expectations are different. I'm really fascinated to see what the priorities are for Will. If you come back with Dante Moore and Dante wins a Heisman, Oregon, let's say hypothetically wins a national championship. We're making this up on the fly, but 26 has been looked at as a season that could be really special. And I know there's going to be a lot to replace on offense. There could be not much to replace on defense sneakily if some things go down in Oregon's favor in terms of how they're able to retain players. But that could be a really, really good team. Let's say all that happens. Now you're talking about being the alpha candidate out here, aside from some of these other coaches that maybe lose jobs, and who knows how crazy the carousel will be next year. But I agree that this could be hey, maybe it's worth waiting and seeing, right? It's kind of the comparison to an NFL draft decision with Dante. Like it's the similar deal where you're going, what can you achieve in this year that maybe changes what the perceptions are next year? And could you go from being, the 5th most attractive draft prospect or coaching prospect to being the number 1? And what does that do from a what's available to you situation, whether it be pay, whether it be opportunity? So I think it's higher than 50%. Both of them are gone just because it's the unfortunate reality that it seems like whenever Oregon is kind of hitting its stride, and maybe it doesn't even have to be that, but it always feels like the jobs that open are the dream jobs. Kenny Dillingham goes to his dream job. Mario Cristobal goes to his dream job. Willie Taggart goes to a dream job. This is Tosh's alma mater. This is the school Will grew up rooting for, right? Like there's heartstrings, there's emotions. It's coming back home for Will. So I think it's better than 50, but I also don't know. I don't know if Stein's going to be offered that job necessarily, because I think there's going to be some, like to your point, there's going to be some candidates. I saw Chip Kelly attached to this job yesterday in an NBC report, which was interesting. So that's going to be interesting. That'll be something to be tracking. This week will be signing day on Wednesday, and then what happens with Oregon staff. And then let's hit the second part of this question here, because we haven't really touched on it. Candidates to replace. I agree. I think Chris Hampton makes a lot of sense on defense. I also know it's never really that simple with the Dan Lanning coaching search. We've been through this a couple of times. You usually have 2 or 3 names that make sense, and then here comes somebody out of left field. Well, Stein was certainly one of those guys at UTSA where, Matt, I remember you put together a hot board and you had all these connections to stuff, coaches that Dan had worked with or coaches that other members of the offensive staff had worked with. And then here comes Stein out of nowhere. So it could very well be another case like that. But if we're saying Hampton is the logical promotion choice on defense, I think Rashad Samples is the logical promotion case on offense. To me, it's a matter of if Dan wants to go internal or external, and there's going to be good candidates either way.
Yeah, I don't know if Samples is going to be ready for that. Maybe he is.
He's still like 30. He's like not even 30, I think.
Yeah, and he's certainly been attached to a couple places to be head coaches at like the lower level group of 5 program. But I don't know if he's there yet. We'll see. Maybe he becomes that guy. Hampton's the obvious one. I think that's probably the odds-on favorite. You kind of promote Hampton to become the DC, and maybe you go out and you hire somebody else. I'll be real curious. Like, Justin Wilcox wanted the head coaching job at Oregon, and I know the fan base's feelings on him and the letter that he was attached to, which he probably didn't have 100% full say on. But all I know is during his time at Cal, Cal's defense, and in particular their linebackers, were really, really good. And their front 7 was really good. They produce a bunch of NFL dudes every year in the defensive backfield. He would be a sneaky under the radar option to see if maybe you could bring him on. Now for Stein, I go back. I think maybe finding a connection to Lanning is going to be difficult. But maybe you go and you look at who are the innovators on offense? Who's the young assistant coach or the head coach at a group of 5 school that's in the Sun Belt or that's in the American or something of that nature, and their offenses are putting up really good stuff, and they're multi dimensional and they can do a bunch of different things really well. Who are those offenses and who are they being run by? That's what I would look at. I'd be curious of, like, I'm just throwing out a name right now, but like Sean Brophy at North Texas, they've obviously been one of the best teams at that level. Their quarterback is going to be, quite honestly, like if he hits the portal,
he's a freshman. He's going to be like the guy in the portal if he hits.
And Brophy is he's the passing game coordinator. He's the quarterback's coach. He's been around and developed Cam Ward at Incarnate Word, and then went to Washington State as a graduate assistant coach. And then in 23-24 went to North Texas as the quarterback's coach, and then this season was promoted to passing game coordinator and also the quarterback's coach. He's a West Coast guy. He's from the state of Arizona. So that would be a guy that just off the cuff would make some sense. He's got some pedigree of developing an elite quarterback. He's got the option now of running one of the best offenses in the country this season. He's got a little bit of ties into Texas now, being in North Texas the last couple seasons. He's a West Coast guy. Those are like, I would look at like Dan Lanning. I think one of the traits that he likes and looks for is who's a guy that's at a school that doesn't have the resources, and I'm acting as if I'm Dan Lanning. Who's at a school that doesn't have the resources that is comparable to us and is still performing either in their conference or at a national level, offensively, defensively, whatever, to what we're doing from a statistical standpoint. Like who's dominating their level and is doing it with less. Let's go and get that guy because he's able to identify talent. He's able to develop talent. He's able to scheme his talent around it. And now we can give him better athletes. It's only going to become even better.
One thing I hadn't I'm just kind of putting this together here. Is Dan's a defensive coach, and when he's made defensive hires, he's hired within his kind of circle, right? You think of Mike Olowski coming in and taking over there. Hampton was somebody they was from the outside, but he was running a very similar scheme. I would imagine it may be just, hey, the continuity of what we've got here on defense, because Dan is very involved, makes it easier to say, let's promote Hampton to DC. Let's promote Rashad Wadood to defensive backs coach. That's a big time recruiter, young assistant coach, another guy like in his late 20s, played at, I think, UCLA. But he's been here for a long time. And when Demetrius Martin left, there was actually, I think, some rumblings that Wadood might be promoted to take that role, and they would continue to split. Hampton would have safeties and Wadood would have corners. Maybe that makes some sense on defense. Offense, though, we've seen him go outside of the Oregon footprint for those, right? That was what he did with Kenny Dillingham. That was what he did with Erik Terry, who had been at Oregon before, but not somebody he had a connection with. So just throwing that out there, that might be something where maybe defense, because of the scheme that he runs, he wants to look for somebody in that smart Saban kind of arc of coaches who are familiar with coaching things in a similar manner. And maybe on offense, he's a little more open to being innovative and checking out something. I thought Matt brought up a good name there as well earlier. So some early thoughts there. Obviously, nothing finalized with either of these guys. I think it's possible that by the time Sunday rolls around, college football, and we're talking, hey, who's Oregon going to play in the opening round? We may also be talking about who the coaching staff will be for that game. And are we correct in assuming both of these guys are going to be on the staff of the postseason run, and what's the case long term too? So this is going to be one of the big storylines. We'll definitely be tracking it. We'll have some reporting and coverage over on DuckTerritory as things become more clear over the next couple of days and maybe the next couple of weeks. All right, we're going to go to this one before we take a break. Excuse me. Just because I don't think we got to talk about it enough. This is from @Stableford. Was this the greatest non-catch / incompletion of all time? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. And we can't put it up on, I guess we could maybe find a way to embed it on our screen right now, but we can't put it up. But it's the Jeremiah McClellan helmet catch that this is referring to. And I've watched this now. We watched it in the press box, and on my very first view, I think both Matt and I thought that might actually be a catch. That was ruled incomplete, but that might be a catch. And then we both saw it on the screen from a couple angles, and we said, that's a catch. That should be a catch. I got a text from a buddy of mine, Husky fan Sam, rooting for Washington. He goes, that's a catch. Got a text from obviously a bunch of Oregon fans. They all thought it was a catch. On the drive back, I was talking to our photographer, Jason Fairchild. He said, I don't know how that wasn't a catch. The TV broadcast thought it was. I still think it was a catch. So I don't know even if I want to call it. I think I'm going to call it an incompletion, but not a non-catch, just in general, just as a rule, because I think that was a catch. I think he caught the football. I think Jeremiah McClellan caught the football there. I was trying to think of moments similar to this, Matt, where somebody made a great play, but it was wiped out by officiating to qualify for this incompletion component. And I couldn't think of one for Oregon. Like, did something come to mind for you that was like a similar, just, oh my gosh moment? And in part because if this stands, like, does Oregon kind of win by 2 or 3 scores here? Like, they might have just run away with this game.
Yeah, I can't think of another like moment that was wiped away by the officiating, but
I'm sure there has been.
You. This is a catch in my book. He hits the ground, and then the ball hits the ground, obviously. But the rule is, as long as you kind of have possession of the ball and it hits the ground and it doesn't move, it's a catch. But you have to have clear control of the ball before it hits the ground, which he did, paired up against his helmet. It would have gone down as, you get the Kenny Wheaton, it's going to score play. You get the Pat Johnson diving into the end zone play against Washington. You have CJ Verdell going up the middle for the walk-off. This would be added into the Rolodex of highlight plays when you play Washington at home, which, by the way, Malik Benson will be on that list as well.
And I was going to say, sneakily, if that McClellan catch stands and Oregon goes and scores, I don't know if Benson's even going to get an opportunity to need to make a play like that. So we would have been robbed of that moment. So I guess it worked out. But yeah, I agree. It would be one of those if it had stood.
Yeah. I think it's in the history of Oregon. Yeah, it's the greatest non-catch of all time. I'm just going to claim it because, quite frankly, there are no other ones that come to mind that absolutely should have been catches.
If fans disagree and they have a list, I apologize. We've been doing this a long time. Sometimes this runs together, and I'm sure there were moments that were like, oh man, the officials totally blew that call and it wiped off something cool that happened. I just can't think of one in a moment of like the magnitude of this. This was like a huge part of this game here, and the play that he seemingly made. Well, also, and this is the part that like I don't think we said the podcast, but everybody watched the replay. Like the reason he had to use one arm is because the Washington defender had his other arm like pulled off to the side, so he couldn't use it. So it could have easily been a pass interference call too, which kind of just adds to the incredible nature of the catch. That was an awesome catch. Should have stood. Bummed it didn't. Saw some catches yesterday in the NFL that were also super cool. I think Jeremiah's
one last night with that Marcus threw. I can't remember the guy.
Treylon Burks.
Yes. Unbelievable catch. But by the way, we're getting off topic here for a second, but Marcus Mariota looked like one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the NFL last night. You really hope he can somehow find a way to get himself an opportunity to be a starter. But if he's not, this is why he's going to probably have 6 or 7 more years in the NFL if he wants to have that long of a career, because he is a very good backup quarterback. And in my opinion, he's good enough to be a starter at this level for a couple more years if he wants to be.
That was so fun last night watching that. You know, because I'll be honest, I was tired coming back. I made the drive back Saturday, got back to Eugene around 1, worked most of the day until the afternoon, took a little rest, and then just to have that game where it's 2 former Oregon quarterbacks, so they're very beloved by the fan base, by the way, battle it out, and for it to go down to overtime and to be decided by a deflected pass on a 2-point try by Denver's defense. I don't know. It was a really, really fun game and a really great way to cap what was a great football weekend for this Oregon program and the fan base.
Real quick, though, to tie it back to Jeremiah McClellan, this is another guy that, like Malik Benson, where would Oregon be if he wasn't on this roster? 3 straight games with 3 or more catches. 4 of the last 5, he's had 3 or more catches. He's not scoring touchdowns. He's only had 2 this season. The most recent one came in the win at home against Minnesota. But he has had a 78-yard game against Washington. He went for 53 against USC and 3 catches. He had to come back through after an injury and fight back from that one. Rutgers, he had a 51-yard performance. And then Oklahoma State, in part because of a big pass play, 76 yards. This guy, almost at 400 yards receiving. I don't know if anyone really anticipated this at the beginning of the year. And you throw out Jeremiah McClellan, you add DeCorian Moore, you've got Evan Stewart if he comes back, which I think he's probably going to do in 2026. And whoever else they add this offseason, they also get Gatlinburg back. Oregon's receiving core next year, because of the development of Jeremiah McClellan and other guys around him, Jamari Johnson at tight end, they're going to go up another level next season, even if they lose Gary Bryant Jr., even if they lose Malik Benson. And I think they've gone up a level from last year. Obviously, Tez Johnson was fantastic and one of the best, if not the best receiver in program history. But I just think the depth at Oregon, maybe they don't have the top guy like a Tez, but the overall depth of this receiving core the bar has been raised. And I don't know if this injury situation played out the way it did last year, if Justice Lowe and I'm not trying to like bang on guys, but I don't think Oregon has a guy on last year's roster that's the 5th or 6th best receiver that has the type of impact McClellan's having right now.
In the same exact vein, and we'll just do a little bit more. I'll try to make this quick because I know Matt has to get over to men's basketball media shortly after this. Did you know how close Jamari Johnson is to like surpassing Terrence Ferguson's second and third best seasons? By the way,
No.
this is kind of interesting. I was looking at this last night. So Jamari had 60 yards receiving. That was his career high. He now has 320 receiving yards and on 23 receptions. Last year, Ferg had 591, 43 receptions, all that. His second and third best receiving seasons were 391 and 415.
Really?
So Jamari Johnson's within 100 yards receiving of surpassing Terrence Ferguson's second and third best receiving seasons. Just something that kind of crept up on me that I thought would be something you'd be surprised by and that maybe the fans wouldn't have caught up on. Just like Jamari, total under the radar MVP for this past game recently.
I said it like 2 weeks ago. I think Jamari Johnson's going to be a high level draft pick next season if he wants to go out. Yeah. He's good.
I think you're right.
All right, let's take a quick break. Come back, finish up the show. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. 3 questions in, 2 more to go.
We are in the basketball portion of our podcast. We have not talked basketball on this podcast, I think, at all, by the way, and it's probably about time. These teams are about a month in. We'll start on the men's side here with a question from @Dylan A. Hoffman. What do you make of the rough start by the men's basketball program? Matt, I'm going to toss this to you since you were the one covering the team, and I'll focus on the second question, which will talk about the women's team.
Not great, Bob. Not great. Yeah. The NCAA net rankings came out today, the first version of it. And I don't think I've ever seen Oregon this low before. 192nd.
Wow.
In the net rankings. They are 1-2 in quad 3 games. They are 3-0 in quad 4. And what was supposed to be a tournament that would give them a boost in net ranking and opponents, they have only played 1 quad 1 team so far on their schedule. Now, that will change drastically in the next couple weeks. Gonzaga comes to town to play Oregon in Portland in about 20 days. They are 5th in the net rankings. Southern Cal comes to Eugene on Tuesday, tomorrow of this recording. They are 20th.
Okay.
Oregon plays at UCLA over the weekend. Of this weekend, that will be another quad 1 opportunity. So there's going to be some chances here, but this program is in a very difficult and very unusual spot for as bad as we've seen it the last couple seasons at Oregon early in the year. This takes the cake. Nate Biddle is hurt. We don't know if he turned his ankle, foot injury in Vegas. Devin Pryor hurt his groin again. In the early minutes of the Creighton game on Thanksgiving, he never returned. He played just 6 minutes. So those 2 guys, I think at best are probably questionable for Tuesday's game against USC. We'll see if they play. And what's really surprising, and it's 7 games in, I understand that, but you're about 23% of your season completed. You're about a quarter of the way there. Narratives are starting to form. Trends are starting to take place on who your team is. This Oregon basketball team is one in which it shoots the 3 ball the most in an Altman era team per game basis. And they are also the worst 3-point shooting team, and not just the Altman era, but the Oregon era of the 3-point percentage lines. And it was added in 87. This is the worst team right now. Certainly a lot of basketball to be played. Certainly plenty of opportunities to improve that number and to get out of that position. But that's where this roster is at. And 100% agreeing here with they didn't recruit enough guards. They didn't recruit enough shooters on this roster. I agree. I don't think they did a good enough job in that area. But Altman probably had an idea. Hey, we're going to try. If we don't get it, this is what we're going to pivot to. We're going to be in the paint. We're going to attack the hoop. We're going to create free throw opportunities. We've got a huge advantage with Nate Biddle and Kwame Evans and Sean Stewart, really athletic big guys. We're going to pound the ball inside. We've got an advantage there. And it was very evident in a game against Oregon State. It was very evident in the second half against Creighton. It was very evident in the game against Auburn for the first 28, 30 minutes or so that this team has the horses, has the players, has the athletes to do work down low and put the ball into the paint and hit the occasional three-pointer. But they don't do that. They revert to shooting threes. They revert to chucking the ball up quick. They revert to turning it over. I think this is a team that, quite honestly, they don't know what a good shot is within this offense. And you could argue that's the players not buying into the system. You could argue the coaching staff hasn't made it very clear to the players to understand what their responsibilities are. But you don't want to freak out too much because every other year, the issues have been fixed. They win 20 games. They get to the tournament. But this one feels a little different. This one feels like if they do get the 20 wins, they do get to the NCAA tournament, it might be one of the better turnarounds the Altman's had to go through mid-season just because of the roster construction. And this team flat out doesn't play the way that they should be playing from a stylistic standpoint either. And Altman's talked about it every game. So it's not like he's just ignoring it. They just aren't playing the way he wants them to play.
I think they got to get some of these games with the LAs, right?
Yes,
they got to get one of these. They have to get one of these. If you're 5-loss team the first week of December, becomes really hard to get the momentum back. The Shellstead injury to me feels really significant, and this is what Dana predicted. Not that it was going to slow Jackson down, which it has a little bit. He shot the ball really poorly at times. Would he go 1 for 11 in one of those games in the player era? But it's getting the rest of the flow right. And I think, Matt, you're onto something there of just, it doesn't feel like they're playing Altman basketball. This shouldn't be a team that is relying on the 3-point shot this much, especially based upon the roster construction. We knew going into the season, like one of the big questions was like, is this team going to have the perimeter shooting? And the fact that they've leaned into it to this degree where they're shooting it, almost 30 times a game, like 25. I mean, it's crazy. That's way too much. So I think this will get fixed. I also know that schedule, to your point, Matt, gets real fast. And if they aren't careful, this could spiral to a situation where unless you win the Big Ten conference championship or go you go with 4 or 5 conference losses, you're going to be left out of the tournament. So
this isn't the Pac-12 where you're going to have 5 teams that just flat out suck. And, you can get 8 wins between those 5 teams in the double round robin that you play. That's not going to be the case when you play in the Big Ten. These teams are going to be too good. And to find your way to winning 14 games in conference play is going to be incredibly difficult. And they're shooting 30% on threes right now. And which is wild to me is they've taken 184 3-pointers through 7 games. And we want to talk about what's their field goal total number. 44% of their shots are 3-pointers.
If you're making 30%, that's bad basketball.
That's
bad basketball unless you're making 40% of those, to be honest. Unless you're an elite shooting team, you shouldn't be shooting 44% of your shots from that range.
417 total field goal attempts, 184 of those are 3-pointers. And this team has quite honestly right now 2 guys that you feel like should be shooting 3-pointers. Takai Simpkins, who's making 37% of his shots. Nate Biddle, who's making 35% of his threes. And it's wild to not include him, Shellstead, but again, 30% 3-point shooter on the year so far. That number will probably go up. You can't live without him being a threat on threes. But this is the one that, Erik, this is the one that's really crazy to me and why I think it's not all on Shellstead. But he sets the table. He has responsibility as a point guard. He's a 30% three-point shooter this season, and 62% of his field goal attempts are threes.
Yeah.
He's not getting to the hoop. He's not creating for others. Now, you could also argue some of this has been, hey, you get stuck in a difficult position with the ball, low clock on the shot clock. You got to create a shot. I get that. But he needs to realize what took Peyton Pritchard from being a solid college point guard to a legitimate NBA player wasn't the three-point shot. It was getting to the hoop and creating free throw opportunities, creating mid-range floaters, creating layups, or getting towards the rim and suffocating the defense towards you and kicking it to an open player for a dunk, layup, jump shot. He's not doing that right now. Some of that's on him. Some of that's on the offense. Some of that's the guys around him not helping. But this team cannot have Shellstead shooting 62% of his shots being three-pointers. Unless he's making over 40, you can't do that.
You brought up Pritchard, 42 points on Sunday, 6-11 from three, but 15 for 22 from the field. So he was getting it done in multitude of ways. Those two are tight. Hopefully there's a conversation to be had there. Do this one maybe a little quick, just because I know Matt's got to hit the road here in a second here. Just wanted to touch.
This is the story of the winner right now.
This is the team that's playing a little bit, maybe a lot bit better than I expected. From @Nash_Duccaneer. Oregon women's basketball is 9-0. Could this be the best team since the Sabrina days? # Autzen Audibles. Yes, I think it could be. We will have a much better idea on Sunday when they go to UCLA. I don't expect they'll win that game, but just how competitive are they against the number 4 team in the country? The Bruins are extremely talented. The Bruins are also really big, which will be a problem for this women's team, which does not have like a true center on it. But it's been really impressive to this point. The margin of victory in those 9 wins is about 30 per game. They are 16th right now in the women's net rankings. They've just beat Auburn, which right now is a quad 1 win on the road at Auburn. Auburn was undefeated going into that game. Gutsy performance. They're down 14 in the third quarter, came all the way back, outscored Auburn by 19 in the second half to get the win. Katie Fiso, I think, is the best guard Oregon has had post Sabrina, and I'm not sure it's all that close. She had 24 points, career high yesterday. On the season, averaging 15.7 assists per game, shooting 58% from the field. And this is something in the context of Shellstead. Matt, you and I have texted a couple times about it. It's impressive. Fiso's not a three-point shooter at all. She made her first threes of the season on Sunday. The first 8 games, she was, I think, 0 for 4. She just doesn't shoot threes.
Yes.
Was put in a couple spots where she had to shoot them, made a couple yesterday, but that's not her game. She gets to the rim. She lives in the mid-range. She is a fantastic women's basketball player and a guard that this school will really enjoy watching. She's a true sophomore. The ceiling here is extremely high. I don't think Oregon is going to be a true national championship contender, probably again under Kelly Graves. That's not a shot at Kelly, but that's just the reality of kind of where the sport has moved. But if they are, it's going to be at the end of this Katie Fiso run as a senior in a couple of years. Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. They haven't really played elite competition, but 9-0, putting away all these teams, going on the road, winning 3 games against teams that 2 of which will be in the tournament, I think, this year in St. Mary's and Auburn. That's a really nice piece of work from this team. And one other name to just throw out here, because Katie deserves all the flowers, but Ahisa Tute, another sophomore, came in the same time as Fiso, had 16 points, 15 rebounds on Sunday. She was the second best player on the court. The 2 of them scored 28 of the team's 34 second half points and all 18 of the fourth quarter points, kind of carried the load. Got kind of a fun, young, exciting team, and one that will be coming to Matthew Knight Arena on Wednesday against Oregon State in a little Civil War hard court action. So it's a fun team, Matt. I'm enjoying watching it and kind of seeing how it comes together. And to me, the record maybe isn't a huge surprise considering some of the competition, but just how they're getting it done, I think they're a little ahead of where I thought they would be this year.
Fiso is awesome to watch because it's everything that you don't see in today's game of basketball from a guard. What do they want to do? They want to get to the rim, or they want to hit the step back, pull up 3-pointer. And it feels like everything Fiso does is, I want to get to the elbow, I want to get to that 12 to 13 range and just make the basket. And she's making like 58% of her field goals
Yeah.
and she's averaging 15 a game and making less than a 3 a game. Like that's wild. That is unbelievably good execution, ball handling, everything about it.
I was just going to say, though, 99 field goal attempts, 8 or 3s this year. I mean, that's crazy to think about. And that's probably almost too much in that direction. But to average 15 points per game as a guard at this point, while not shooting the 3 really at all, it's like not part of your game. She can make them, but she doesn't shoot them at a high clip. It's impressive. Yeah, and this is a team that has some depth and some players off the bench. I mentioned Atute, who's not a starter right now, who are starting to really get it done. I'm not saying this is going to be a team that is competing for a Big Ten championship. I think that's a step too far. I still think this is a team that's probably at best in that 4th to 5th to 6th range in the conference would be my, maybe I'm sleeping on them a little bit there, but it's definitely a team that's worth your time if you're a basketball fan locally to come check them out. Attendance has not been great post Sabrina, really, since I guess they had a couple of good years there, but especially the last 2 or 3. This is a team that's going to remind you of some of those Sabrina teams. Not saying it's the same ceiling, but just they play a fun style. It's not last year's team where it was they're going to win in the 50s or they won a couple games in Big Ten play in the 40s. It's a team that wants to play in the 70s to 80s and is capable of getting it done there. So we'll talk much more about both of these programs, I think, this month than we have in November because there's going to be a little bit of a football break. I'm excited to dive in, and I'm excited just to see for both teams, how do they handle playing UCLA on the road, I think, back-to-back days. So that's going to be really telling for both programs.
Yeah, it's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Continue to submit your questions. Thanks again for those that did. We'll also dive into more football. We'll also dive into signing day. We'll get Jackson on to talk some recruiting this week and a lot more as the college football season rolls on for the Ducks and the men's and women's basketball programs continue their years, and we'll track those as well. Until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.